Hey guys, I'm back with the episode 3 for the coding with me. First of all, I'm sorry about the late episodes for this one. The basic reason behind that is that I was a bit busy the last week and the week before that too. So, today we'll be starting with different types of loops. So, there are two types of loops, that is the entry control loop and the exit control loop. The entry control loop basically defines itself by considering that they only check the condition before we enter the loop. I mean, before the execution of the body of the loop. Whereas the exit control loop defines itself by saying that after the condition, after the body of the loop is executed, the conditions are checked. So, examples for the entry control loop is for loop and while loop, whereas the exit control loop has only a single example, that is the do while loop. So, first of all, let us try the example that I gave last time, that is using the nested if else statement for finding out the number greater between three different types of numbers entered by the user. So, first of all, as we can see that we have got three values entered by the user, that is the xyz that we always have. I mean, we don't use any other variables in this. I always go for xyz. I kind of love them. So, first of all, the first condition would be checked, that is if x is greater than y. Consider an example where x equals to 1, y equals to 2 and z is equal to 3. So the first condition would not be true, as 1 is never going to be greater than 2. Okay, so this part of the body would not be executed. So let's move on to the second part, that is the else statement. As we know that 2 is always greater than that, 2 is always greater than 1, so the else part would obviously be executed. So as we can see that we have another condition in the else part, that is y greater than z or not. As we know that in our example, y equals to 2 and z equals to 3. So let me ask you something, is 2 greater than 3 or not? Obviously not, right? So the else part would only be executed as the condition is not true. So the only thing that would be printed is percentage d is greater, and here the value of percentage d would be equal to z, as we have stated in here. Okay, now let's move on to the thing we have to do, like the basic thing that we have to do today, that is the for loop. Yeah, it's really tough. Like, what you have to learn in this, just the syntax and some basic knowledge about it. That's it. Like, that's what I thought, but there is something really more to it than what we see. Okay, so let's move into it. So the syntax for the for loop is the keyword for, and in the bracket there would be three different statements. The first statement is the initialization statement, the second is the conditional statement, that is here, and the third is the increment or decrement statement, that is this. So every time the for loop is initialized by the first statement, like in this case the value of y is 0 and the for loop would be initialized from this part. So when we enter the for loop, the body of this for loop would be executed. Then what would happen is that the value of y would be incremented by 1 or any other value that you have to be given, you give in the increment or decrement section. So after that the condition would be checked. Yes, like after initialization and before the execution of the body of the loop, the condition would obviously be checked first because it is an entry control loop. So the if we consider a step by step explanation for a for loop, then we can say that the first step would be initialization, the second would be the condition is being checked. In this part the initialization is I equals to 0. Okay, so after that the condition would be checked if 0 is greater than 0 is less than 10 or not, and of course it is true. So the body of the loop would be executed. The fourth step would be the increment part. The value of I would become 1, as we have a increment of 1 in this loop. Okay, so after that again the condition would be checked, that is the step 5 of this loop. The condition would be is 1 less than 10 or not, and it's obvious, like, Yeah, it is true. So again, the body of the loop will be executed, and in such a way, until and unless the conditional statement is not false, the body of loop will be executed, and once the condition is false, the loop would be terminated. So let us see what the output for this loop would be equal to. According to me, as the condition for the loop is I less than 10, so whenever the value of I would be equal to 10, the body would not be executed, as the condition would be false. So every number that is, every integer that is less than 10 would be printed in this for loop, and once the loop would be terminated, the statement exactly after this loop would be executed, and in this part we have the statement after the execution as printf over, so that we can understand that the loop has been terminated. So let's see. Yup, as I told you, every integer that is smaller than 10 would be printed, and as you can see on the screen, it is true. So let's move on to our next program. Yup, I'm sorry about this miss. Yup, so the next task is conditional statements inside a for loop. So the for loop is similar to the previous one, but the only difference between the first and the second for loop is the conditional part and the increment decrement part too. And here we have used pre-increment, whereas in the previous one we have used post decrement. Actually, it doesn't make any sense, right? Like I plus plus and plus plus I would be giving out the same outputs for a for loop. Like if I execute the previous statement using a pre-increment statement, then the output would be exactly the same. So they don't make much of a difference. Okay, so let's move on to this part. Here the conditional statement is I less than or equal to 10. So if we print all the values of I inside this loop, then we can see that the values would be printed from 0 and up to 10, and not as same as the previous one. Like there were only 0 to 9 printed, but in this one every number from 0 up to 10 and 10 inclusive would be printed. But as we can see that we have got this condition inside this, this time we are not printing the values of I in this for loop. So what we are gonna do in this one is that when the value of I would be equal to 5, the output would be given as this line is equal to 5, or else whenever they are not equal to 5, the output would be just whoa. That's magic, I guess. No, it's just logic. Okay, so let's see what we can do with it. But I have a question for you guys. What do you think? How many times do you think the statement "whoa" would be printed? Comment down below. Let's see. Okay, so up to 5 only woe will be printed, and as it starts from 0, number of woes printed before 5 would be equal to 5, and after 5, that is 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, the statement woe is to be printed. So number of woes printed in this for loop would be equal to 10, and the line where I equals to 5 will give us the output this line is equal to 5. So if you got this answer correct, you're doing good. Okay, so what if I tell you that you can terminate a loop at any time that you want, like at any condition that you want to check and execute the loop and terminate it? Then I would say that you have two different statements. First one is the continue, and the second one is break. The continue statement is used when you want to move on to the next iteration, whereas the break statement is used whenever you want to terminate the loop. Terminate it. Yeah, it's that simple. Like, as the name suggests, break. It would break the loop and execute the exactly next statement after the for loop. Okay, so consider that we give two conditions. Like, whenever the value of I would be equal to 2, we don't want to print the value of I and continue to the next iteration. And whenever the value of I would be equal to 5, let's terminate the loop and execute the next line. Okay, so mm, yeah, I got an idea. Let's use conditional statements, I guess. Yeah. लूप खत्म. Okay, so as you can see that we have used the else if later in this for loop. So the first condition would be if I equals to 2, that is whenever the value of I equals to 2, the CU in the next iteration would be printed and the loop would continue to the next iteration, and it would not execute any statement after that including this one. So this means that 2 would not be printed like the other numbers. Okay, and after that the second condition is that when the value of I is equal to 5, the statement loop khatam bahar milo would be printed and the loop would be terminated, which means that no iteration would be taking place after the break part. Okay, so this means that the value 5 would not also be printed and any number after 5 would also not be printed. And I have wrote this printf statement after the for loop so that we can check whether the increment decrement statement takes place of the break after the break statement or not. Okay, so if it takes place, I mean if the increment decrement takes place after the break statement, then the last value that should be printed should be equal to 10. Actually it should be 11, I guess, right? But if it does not take place after the break statement, then the last value that should be printed would be equal to 5, right? So let's see which one takes place. Okay, so as I told you guys that after the continue statement 2 will not be printed and see you in the next iteration takes place, right, as you can see here, and the iteration changes to I equals to 3. After the I equals to 5 condition, we have wrote the break statement, due to which no increment decrement takes place and neither any of the values after the after the break statement would be executed, and the loop has been terminated and the last printf statement printed the 5 value. So my answer was correct, that increment decrement does not take place after the break statement. So to summarize this session of today, we have learned that there are two types of loops, that is the entry controlled and exit controlled loops. Entry controlled loops check the condition before entering the body of the loop, whereas the exit control loops check the condition after the execution of the body of the loop. So examples of entry control loop are for and while, whereas the examples of exit control loops are do while loops. So the syntax of for loop is the keyword for, and inside the bracket there would be three statements. The first one is the initialization statement, second is the conditional statement, and the third one is the increment decrement statement, in which post or pre doesn't really matter, where only in special cases they might matter. Okay, and the portion between the two curly brackets of a for loop is known as the body of the for loop. Okay, and we can use conditional statements inside a for loop too, and there are two different types of statements to be used inside a loop, called as the break and the continue. The continue statement would move on to the next iteration, and no statement after the continue statement would be executed, but the next iterations will take place, and the increment decrement would also take place as it is a loop. But the break statement completely breaks or terminates the loop and executes the exactly next statement after the loop. I hope you guys have understood this, and I should end this session today. And by the way, if you've made this far in this video, then I hope that you guys treat yourself to a chocolate. Like, thanks a lot, guys. See you in the next lecture. Hey guys, I'm back with the episode 3 for the coding with me. So, first of all, I'm sorry about the late episodes for this one.